Okay, and welcome to a special edition of the AtlanticCityBeat.com right here on 96.1 WTTH The Touch. We are coming to you today from inside of the mayor's office. In the background, you will see, I'm guessing, all of the people who have been mayor of the fair city of Atlantic City. Before we get started with our special guest today, I just want to send a special shout out to two very important people. Shout out number one goes to Robert Laws. I want to thank him very much for his contributions to making sure that the Atlantic City Beat got back here on the touch. He knows what he did. I want to also send a special shout out to Miss Sheila Harvey from Special Events here in the city of Atlantic City. And the reason why I'm doing that is because a couple days ago I had the gracious opportunity to be the host of the city's annual Black History program, and that was so special and significant. It reaffirmed what I already knew about Atlantic City, which is that we produce greatness, and that the nonsense that you hear about the violence and the drugs and the media, that is the exception, not the rule. The rule is we produce greatness. And greatness was on tap and on show all throughout that Black History program we did at the Great Soldiers Home. And nobody knows more about how great Atlantic City is than me growing up here, except for probably, or I guess, Atlantic City's number one citizen, Mayor Lorenzo T. Langford. Good afternoon, which is actually be morning when they broadcast on the touch, but thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
You're welcome, and good afternoon and good morning.
Okay, so let's get right to it. I would be remiss if I didn't start off with some of the uncomfortable stuff. If we were doing a call-in show, which you've done call-in shows on the touch before, you can probably affirm what I'm about to say. People were called in with all kind of comments directed at you, blaming you for the violence in Atlantic City. Now, I think we can both agree that any shooting in Atlantic City is one too much, but what would you say as the mayor with regards to what's been reported as a rash or an outbreak of violence in this city?
Well, first of all, let me say that you're right. There are always going to be those who look to assign blame in any situation, particularly those that have negative connotations. Assign that blame to the officials, whomever they are. So in that sense, I don't take it personally a lot of times, and I do realize that it comes with the territory. There is a bullseye of sorts on your back as mayor. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I accept, even though I don't agree with a lot of the criticism that's laid at my feet. Let me say this though, the violence, and particularly the shootings and the murders that have taken place in Atlantic City, particularly the ones in 2012 where we tied a record for the number of murders in 1 year. It's bigger than just Atlantic City. It is a national phenomenon that has swept across urban areas throughout the nation. The city of Chicago, for an example, in 1 month had 100 homicides in a month. Now, obviously, they're a lot larger than Atlantic City, so there too you need to offer some perspective. But the point is that we live in a violent society, and nowhere is that manifested more than it is in urban areas. Interestingly, though, to me, there seems to be this national debate surrounding the question of gun control. And all we need is one horrific incident, such as the one that happened in Newtown, Connecticut, to spur that kind of national debate. Such was the case a decade or so ago when we had that tragedy and unfortunate, unthinkable situation that happened in Columbine. But it's interesting to me that in urban areas across America, it's a daily occurrence.
Right.
The difference, though, is that the weapon that befalls so many people in urban areas happens to be handguns, as opposed to what they call assault weapons, high velocity weapons in some of these other more noted tragedies that take place.
Okay.
And so I think that we need to expand the discussion of gun control to start talking about how do we stop the transportation of illegal handguns into these urban areas. I know you can't wait to talk about Governor Christie, so I'll fire the opening salvo in this context. You know, the governor was critical of me, as he has been on many occasions. And when someone asked him to comment about the 19th homicide in Atlantic City last year, he said it was the mayor's fault. And of course I responded, as I always do and will continue to do when he's wrong. The point is that we don't have, there are no gun manufacturing plants, no handgun manufacturing plants in any of our urban cities. Right. Atlantic City, Camden, Trenton, etc. So the real question is, how are these handguns getting into urban areas? And what is the governor and other officials on the state and federal levels doing to abate that problem? I think that's really where the center of attention and the focus needs to go with respect to handguns. Now, it doesn't do anybody any good to blame the mayor or blame anybody else. It is really a matter of personal responsibility.
Well, let me ask you something. One thing, again, building off of that great Black History program we had, I was inspired to contact several people I went to school with, and you know, we're going to try and start a speaking tour this summer called Atlantic City Success Stories, where I'm going to be requesting a lot of my successful friends to come back home, to go into the schools and talk to young people about being successful, period, not necessarily just about guns and drugs and violence, but what can the average person who's not a mayor, not a radio personality, what can the average person from Atlantic City do to help abate this violence problem?
It's a question of morality. I can say that I know Ray Tyler.
Right.
And I know Ray Tyler would never resort to picking up a pistol and shooting and killing somebody just because he had a disagreement with him. Right. Because your family didn't raise you that way. And so too often people look to assign blame to people such as I, as mayors, council people. But as they point one finger at us, the other three are pointing right back at them. I would hope like hell, if I could get away with using that terminology, right, that my sons would never degenerate into being those kinds of pariahs in society. I think that my wife and I have done a good job instilling certain values in them where unless their own life was threatened, they would never think about taking another person's life. It comes down to personal responsibility and the way that these young folk in this generation are being reared. It is the parents who have failed, not the politicians.
There you have it. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the AtlanticCityBeat.com on 96.1 WTTH The Touch. You can also see highlights from this interview at AtlanticCityBeat.com. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the whole Chris Christie phenomenon. You're listening to the Atlantic City Beat on 96.1 WTTH The Touch.